Hello and welcome to China Global Television Network. This is The World Today. I'm Beatrice Marshall in Nairobi. Chinese authorities say 45 Vietnamese nationals have been rescued after their vessel sank in the South China Sea. The Vietnamese flagged vessel carrying 62 people went down in adverse weather in the Nan Sha Islands on Saturday. The Chinese rescue ship detected a rocket parachute distress signal that evening and located the stricken vessel. Rescue ships and a helicopter were deployed for rescue efforts. Vietnam's Foreign Ministry spokesperson has thanked Chinese authorities for their prompt support and close coordination. 6 ships and 1 rescue helicopter are continuing the search and rescue operations for the remaining 17 crew members. Those rescued thanked the teams for their work. To southern China now, where Typhoon Noel has weakened to a severe tropical storm after it made landfall in Hudong County of Guangdong Province. Noel is the strongest typhoon to make landfall in China so far this year and the most powerful to strike east of the Pearl River estuary in a decade. The central government has allocated 100 million yuan to support Guangdong Province in restoring its infrastructure. CGTN's Shu Hua has more.
The county has been battered by torrential rain and howling winds since last night, and Huizhou City has relocated over 200,000 people to safer areas. And this is one of the emergency shelters in Huidong County. And downstairs, some local residents are settled last night. As the rain has become relatively light right now, they have headed back to their houses to check the damage. This room on the second floor is housing to over 20 people. And over here we can see some emergency supplies and like bread, water and porridge, and also instant noodles. And also the local authorities has provided some common medicines for the people here, just in case of some diseases like fever and colds. And also inside the room we can see the power and the telecommunications are all working well. Across Guangdong Province, authorities have taken extensive precautionary measures. Over 800,000 people have been relocated and thousands of emergency personnel are deployed to respond. The primary and special concerns is now focused on, mountainous areas where landslide and mudslide and also rockfalls could pose a threat.
China has activated its flood control emergency response across 7 provincial level regions as the storm continues to unleash high winds and torrential rainfall. In the hardest hit areas, including Jiangxi, Hunan and Guangdong, the response has been escalated to level 3. The government has urged local water conservancy authorities to issue timely warnings and make targeted use of flood control infrastructure. It has also dispatched 5 teams to affected regions to provide on-site guidance for flood control. The Ministry of Transport has activated a level 1 emergency response for torrential rain while maintaining a level 2 response for the typhoon. In the worst affected regions, road inspections are conducted at least once every 2 hours on routes that remain open. Closed roads must pass safety inspections before reopening. Typhoon Noel is now lashing the coast of the eastern province of Fujian. Local authorities have suspended 18 ferry routes, halted 72 waterfront construction projects and closed 16 tourist attractions. 6 major reservoirs have also released water to lower their levels. More than 23,000 people have been moved to safety. Nearly 30,000 rescuers and over 79,000 pieces of emergency equipment, including helicopters, rescue boats and satellite phones, are on standby for emergency operations. Devastating scenes are unfolding across southern France. Nearly 200,000 people have been evacuated since wildfires broke out earlier this week, making this the country's worst wildfire season on record. Sarah Coates reports from Gironde in southwestern France.
Water-bombing aircraft swoop low over this inferno raging just outside Bordeaux. But load after load of water disappears into the flames as a fire tears through the forest.
The intensity is enormous. We already had a fire in 2022 in the same spot. It started right here. As you can see, there's nothing left. And 4 years later, we're back in the same place. It's spreading to areas that didn't burn last time.
Moments after we spoke to Arnaud, the wind picked up, fanning the flames as scorched pine needles rained down around us. This feels apocalyptic. You can hear the roar of this fire coming through this pine forest. We're 20 kilometres west of Bordeaux, and this is the biggest of the 32 fires raging out of control down here in the south of France.
The
fire is 500 metres away and the flames are leaping 500 metres. We're heading into a burned area, but with the wind they're forecasting at 80 kilometres per hour, I don't think we'll make it out. It's going to spread.
Fire trucks race towards the flames, but with the fire moving this fast, there's only so much crews can do. It's now jumped the road here, and is burning through these trees. There are a number of spot fires that have also broken out, so it is an extremely concerning situation. A bit further down the road, the race was on to get these horses out. Spooked by the smoke and noise, they were rushed onto trailers and driven to safety. And as animals were moved out of danger, the local community was rallying behind those still heading towards it. At this makeshift reception centre, beds were laid out and huge quantities of food prepared for exhausted firefighters.
We're making them some paella and camembert with fries. That way, they can eat and regain their strength to fight a fire.
It's a small window for crews to eat, rest and try to recover before heading back towards the flames.
Flames are blanketing the outskirts of Spain's capital, Madrid. Prime Minister Pedro Sánchez says wildfires have already burnt 130,000 hectares of forest so far this year. Ken Brown tells us more.
The fire still out of control. A somewhat hopeful message from Pedro Sánchez. The humidity is up and the temperatures are down, which is good news. But the wind set to pick up again later this evening, which could complicate things further. We heard a very interesting interview from Virginia Barcones. She is the Secretary General of Emergencies here in Madrid. She was talking about how climate change and the climate crisis is now causing these fires to be more frequent, more ferocious and more difficult to predict, and that's what we're seeing. Look at the exodus that we're having here on the road. Thousands of people trying to get out of the town of Almorox and the surrounding areas, the surrounding villages. We have 14 different emergency centres now set up in Madrid for people to get to.
The US has held back from launching airstrikes on Iran for the first night in 2 weeks. Washington has given no immediate explanation. There were also no reports on Saturday of Iranian attacks in the region, strikes that have become a near daily response to US actions. But the US military says its naval blockade against Iran remains fully in effect. Citing 2 people briefed on the discussions, the New York Times reported Saturday night that President Trump has for now decided against earlier plans to ramp up attacks on Iran. Yemen's Houthi militants have fired on Saudi oil installations at 2 ports along the Red Sea coast, and Saudi-backed forces have bombed the Houthis. That fighting threatens a second major shipping route and risks reigniting Yemen's civil war. Jagruti Dave has more from Washington, D.C.
Iran-backed militia groups said they fired missiles at Saudi Arabia, targeting Aramco facilities. That's the largest oil company in the world, in the cities of Yanbu and Jizan, both on the Red Sea. And this was retaliation for Saudi attacks on Yemen's Red Sea port, Hodeidah. And that is really fueling concerns about a second front opening in the war, and that's in the Red Sea, involving the Houthis and Saudi Arabia. The two have been fighting for more than a decade. That stopped in 2022, but there are worries that this latest tension could be a reigniting of those old fissures and adding to the existing war between Iran and the US over control over the Strait of Hormuz, another front in the Red Sea. So the first night in 2 weeks reported without any reported strikes, no explanation from US CENTCOM. Donald Trump says the US is talking to Iran, but it's repeated the position, the US position, that Iran is not ready to make a deal, echoing his Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, who said Iran is not serious. And Iran says it's exchanging messages with the US, but will not bow down to pressure. So, as I say, tensions continuing to run rife in the region. While Donald Trump has also noted Tehran is showing some more seriousness, as he puts it, in talks, US forces, he says, remain locked and loaded. And Donald Trump has vowed major military punishment for both Tehran and the Houthis. These reports suggest that the US is bringing in more forces, military doctors, weapons to the Middle East to give the president more options if he chooses to expand the conflict. We don't have anything more official on this, but Donald Trump has threatened to widen the scope of US targets. We know that. He's threatened to hit power plants, bridges, to bomb Pickaxe Mountain, that underground Iranian nuclear complex, but he has publicly said he hasn't made a decision on new strikes. Now, there's obviously the international consideration of what strategically the US should do, but there's also domestic considerations for the president about the cost of the war. His defense secretary says that's come to $37.5 billion so far. There's also the rising oil and gas prices in the run-up to the midterms, which must be a consideration, even though Donald Trump has claimed that midterms won't affect his planning on the Iran war. But I'm sure there are some Republicans who would argue that perhaps it should be.
And that is it for this edition of The World Today. I'll be back shortly with more news from the continent in Africa Live. Thanks for watching. The Ebola-hit eastern region of the Democratic Republic of the Congo continues to be hit by an ADF insurgency. We'll see how historians in Nigeria are using modern technology to save the nation's history and culture from erosion. And several cheetahs are translocated from South Africa to Zambia, where the species has been absent for nearly 30 years. I'm Beatrice Marshall in Nairobi. Welcome to Africa Live. And we begin in the Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo, where at least 32 people have been killed in a spate of attacks by an Islamist armed group known as the Allied Democratic Forces. Local media report that 25 people were killed when the attackers stormed the village of Njiapanda Bela on Wednesday. 2 days later, 7 more civilians were killed in Lukaya. Both villages are in the Mambasa territory of Ituri province, which continues to battle a major Ebola outbreak. Several other people are also reported to have been abducted. Civil society groups are urging the Congolese government to reinforce security operations despite ongoing joint military offenses with Uganda. The armed group has been linked to the deaths of more than 100 people across 20 villages in Mambasa since March, highlighting the worsening security crisis in the region. Let's cross over to Jafar Al-Katani. He's joining us via Zoom from Goma City. Jafar, what can you tell us about these latest attacks blamed on the ADF?
There were 2 attacks of ADF in the zone of Mangina, what is between, so a zone neighboring the 2 provinces of North Kivu and Ituri, where 30-something people were killed according to the local civil society, and the record from the authorities is fewer than that because the army didn't get the access directly as people stopped them because people were so angry and blocked the road. And we must know that ADF is in attacks in that zone since 3 months now, as FRDC is attacking ADF in the zone of the North Kivu. Then now ADF starts attacking the east of North Kivu. And this is the problem in that region because ADF is in the bush, and it seems that they have the knowledge of the zone more than the FRDC, and they used to leave a zone directly when FRDC attack them in one zone, then they start killing in another zone. And this is a problem which people are facing now in the limits of North Kivu and Ituri in the Mangina zone close to Mombasa territory.
Well, Jaffa, what is the response from the DRC security forces as this all unfolds?
The FRDC and the Uganda forces are in that zone for now 5 years, and they are tracking and destroying many ADF camps. But the problem still that ADF is still alive. That means that the operation have not yet succeeded because we are still registering ADF attacks every day. And last week, this week, the spokesperson of the FRDC operation in the zone called people to desolidarize with the ADF and to still trust him to the army. So they want people to collaborate with them because according to them, no one can succeed in that area because it's in the bush without the collaboration of locals. But we can say that they still have much that is to do to make end of these ADF attacks.
Well, this province of Ituri, where the attacks are currently happening, is also the epicenter of the current Ebola outbreak. How is the insecurity affecting the virus response and control measures?
It's not only about Ituri, but also about the north of North Kivu province, the territory of Beni, where the 2 zones are hit by the 17th outbreak of Ebola. And the zone also have militia and especially ADF. And this is a really problem to the outbreak response team because it's not easy to these civilians, doctors, nurses, and health promoters to to move from the many cities of Beni and Bunia to the area in the bush, in villages, while ADF are operating in the middle. And this is what affected the 2017 outbreak in the same zone, because militia were attacking and killing response teams, and in some areas it was very difficult to get a response of Ebola, and people were a lot affected by these attacks and by the disease.
All right, Jaffa Al-Katanti joining us there live from Goma City. Now, humanitarian organizations are calling for immediate and better protection in the province of Ituri as the ADF continues its brutal insurgency. CGTN's Daniel Arap Moy takes a deeper look at the escalation in violence since March.
In March 2026, the Allied Democratic Forces intensified its insurgency when it overran the Muchacha gold mining site in the eastern Congolese province of Ituri. The ADF is an Islamist armed group which originated in Uganda but now operates in the eastern DRC. It wants to overthrow Congolese rule in the region and set up an Islamic state. According to the UN, 67 people were killed at the mine alone, but dozens of civilians were also abducted. Just days later, on March 14th, an ambush targeted a military convoy heading towards Mambasa, a town about 100 kilometers east of Muchacha, killing 7 soldiers and a senior officer. On April 1st, the group hit the village of Bafakoa. More than 70 civilians were killed as fighters torched homes and vehicles. Then came a major tactical shift. On April 30th, ADF fighters struck Sukanamboka in Utwele province, marking the group's first documented violent offensive in the province in over 15 years, threatening critical transport corridors and local mining operations. May proved to be one of the bloodiest stretches of the year, with coordinated multi-village attacks spilling across the borders of North Kivu and Ituri. Between May 5th and 7th, insurgents struck a string of settlements including Katirain, Mangambo, Ikaya and Biakato. The UN says over 40 people lost their lives in the 48-hour window. By May 11th, local authorities had reported at least 50 civilian deaths in a single week after overnight raids devastated the villages of Makumo and Mabuo. Just 2 days ago, the ADF rebels launched 2 coordinated overnight attacks on isolated villages in Mambasa, killing at least 32 civilians. Civil society leaders have confirmed that over 130 civilians have been killed in the Mambasa territory alone since March. With massive displacements amid an ongoing Ebola outbreak, humanitarian organizations are calling for immediate protection for their staff. They also say a major intervention is needed to prevent more ADF massacres. Daniel Arap Moy, CGTN.
Meanwhile, authorities in Ituri are also having to deal with protests linked to the Ebola response. The Elikia Ebola Treatment Center in Bunia, the city at the heart of the epidemic, was rocked on Saturday by workers who say they haven't been paid by the government, despite their efforts to curb the spread of the deadly virus. They also decried what they call the lack of government goodwill and failed promises to support workers under the free healthcare program. The protests come despite a visit by Prime Minister Judith Suminwa to Luka on Thursday. She acknowledged the problem and said the government was working on a solution. It's been nearly 2.5 months since the first Ebola case was confirmed in the eastern DRC. More than 3,000 cases have since been confirmed, along with over 1,300 deaths.
We're getting ready to go to the governor's office. We haven't been paid by the Congolese government for the past 2 months. We've done everything we can, but we haven't received any wages, which is why we want to go to the governor's office today to see the governor. We want to be paid for June and July. That's 2 months back pay. If we aren't paid, we won't carry on working.
We have been left to our own devices. And when you look at the statistics, you see that even in these CTE centers here, the recovery rate is high. We are giving our all to look after our patients. But why can't the government support us?
We've already made sacrifices, and if we carry on like this, we'll be sacrificing ourselves for nothing. And when the time comes, there'll be infections too, and people will die. Who is going to look after us? Who is going to look out for us? Who is going to compensate us? Who is going to pay us? First and foremost, the government needs to think about us.
Now, much of the eastern DRC is experiencing some kind of turmoil. South of Ituri, many towns in the provinces of South and North Kivu are under the occupation of M23 rebels. In such situations, children are often the ones who bear the brunt of the violence and unrest. Many struggle not just with the physical strain, but also the emotional. However, in some areas, they are getting support from a tried and tested method. CGTN's David Mbithi with the details.
At the Levmoy orphanage in Goma, young people are participating in social capoeira sessions. This form of martial art combines footwork, music and singing, and has quickly become a means of restoring children's confidence, promoting values of peace and training a new generation of social educators. Some of them were street children before coming here, and others escaped the rebel violence that has plagued Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo for many years.
In our work, we first assess the level of trauma a child has experienced so we can work effectively with them to help them progress. So among the children at the orphanage, many were at the personal level, and now there are those who have reached the social level.
The organization Gingando Pelpaz has been working with street children and vulnerable minors since 2020, providing them with psychosocial support through martial arts. Already implemented as part of social projects in Brazil and Haiti, this approach has now been adapted to the context of Goma through its Capoeira Academy.
Most of the children who had been traumatized by war or the death of their parents were no longer able to express themselves. They would sit in the classroom all day. The children were unable to interact with others. Most of them were in this situation.
The organization works with several shelters and orphanages, including the Levmoy orphanage. All participants wear the same T-shirt, a symbol of their participation in a program based on learning, protection and rebuilding. This significant support has been welcomed by young learners and orphanage administrators.
I practice capoeira because I love it. It helps me a lot. When I first started, I was under a lot of stress, but the program transformed me psychologically. It helped me develop my intellectual and physical abilities and so much more.
About 50 young people are undergoing training to become social educators capable of in turn mentoring and supporting other vulnerable children. For many teenagers who have lost their bearings due to the conflicts, these sessions represent much more than just a sports activity. They offer a space for learning, protection and hope where everyone can gradually rebuild their future. David Mbithi, CGTN.
And let's turn to Tunisia, which is battling record wildfires as the country grapples with an intense heat wave. In the latest briefing, a senior official said they recorded at least 900 fires over a 72-hour period. The official noted that most of the blazes recorded between 20 and 22nd July had been extinguished, although two major ones were still raging. An Italian firefighter aircraft joined efforts to contain the wildfires on Friday after the nation requested international assistance. Algeria has also deployed resources to bolster firefighting efforts. Senegal's political landscape has entered a new phase after President Bassirou Diomaye Faye officially launched his own political party, formalizing his split from former ally Ousmane Sonko. The move ends a partnership that swept the pair to power in 2024 under the ruling PASTEF party. However, they eventually fell out over key policy issues, most notably negotiations with the IMF as Senegal grapples with a deepening debt crisis. Although Sonko was dismissed as Prime Minister earlier this year, his PASTEF party still controls parliament. The political rivalry is now expected to shape Senegal's local elections next year and set the stage for a fiercely contested presidential race in 2029. Faye's new party is called the Republican Patriots Party. A growing debate is rising in Africa over whether visa application fees should be refunded when applications are rejected Globally, Nigeria and Senegal are among the countries recording the highest refusal rate, with rejected applications costing their economies and applicants millions of dollars. CGTN's Kelechi Mekalam brings us more from Abuja.
Elliot Ozegbe has spent years trying to secure a visa to pursue his education abroad. The Nigerian civil servant applied to the US once and Canada twice, spending money on school applications, transcripts and visa-related expenses. But after his applications were denied, much of that money was lost.
So the money spent in all this process, remove the money I got back from school and less administrative charges, minimum 4-5 M. That you just went down the drain, you don't get it back.
For Ozegbe, the financial loss came on top of the time and effort invested in pursuing his plans to study abroad. But he's not alone. A report by Lego Collective, a London-based research organization, says Nigeria and Senegal have some of the highest visa refusal rates in the world, and it puts the average refusal rate for Schengen short-stay visas at about 45.9%, while more than 85% of Canadian temporary visa applications are reportedly denied. It estimates that rejected short-stay visa applications cost African countries more than $179 million last year. Visa application fees are paid before an application is assessed, and in most cases, that money is not returned when an application is rejected. The reasons for visa refusals vary from concerns over financial capacity and ties to the home country to fears of irregular migration and overstaying. The debate now is whether applicants should bear the full cost when a visa is refused or whether part of the fee should be returned.
I'm not an advocate of visa fee not being refunded if you deny such people or such individual who are looking for entrance into your country. Let me start an example like Morocco now. They don't collect visa fee, but once your visa is granted, you pay the visa fee. Once your visa are not granted, you don't need to pay any money. I think other countries should follow suit and do like Morocco at least, so that you don't just collect money for services that you do not render.
For diplomats, the principle of reciprocity means that what one country does to the citizens of another can influence how its own nationals are treated in return.
And because diplomacy is a game of reciprocity, the principle of reciprocity is there. It could be also that we are also applying the same principle to their own citizens when they apply for our country's visa in our missions in their countries. It couldn't obviously be a one-way traffic. I'm sure Nigeria is doing that.
As calls grow for greater transparency and possible refunds, the issue now raises a wider question. Should applicants bear the full financial cost of a decision made by a foreign mission? For now, visa fees remain largely non-refundable, but for millions spent on unsuccessful applications, the debate is far from over. Kelechi Mekalam, CGTN, Abuja, Nigeria.
Now, in an age where artificial intelligence is transforming how the world creates, stores and shares information, a quieter race is unfolding in Nigeria, the race to save history before it disappears. For decades, poor documentation, neglected archives and fading oral traditions have left significant gaps in the country's collective memory. Now, historians Archivists, artists and technology innovators are turning to digital tools to preserve stories that might otherwise be lost forever. Here is CGTN's Deji Bademosi with more on the story.
History has a way of slipping quietly into silence. Sometimes it disappears with a fire, sometimes through neglected archives, and sometimes when the last person who remembers a story is no longer here to tell it. Across Nigeria, a growing number of researchers, artists and technology innovators are working against that clock, using digital tools to preserve memories that future generations may never otherwise encounter. Cultural historian and archivist Oludamola Adebowale is one of them. For more than a decade, his platform Ashiri Magazine has been documenting Nigerian history through digital storytelling, online archives and historical research. For him, preserving history isn't simply about recording the past. It's about protecting identity.
As a race, as a tribe, as a collective group of people, cultural heritage and arts is the backbone of who we are as a person. You know, without it, we are lost. So we started with an illustration magazine back then, and we were uploading it on Dropbox, and people were downloading. Then over the course of the years, we moved on to different social media platforms: Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn, TikTok, and And once we got into that space of using social media to promote history, we started also digging into the archives to see what document needs to be preserved, to see what document needs to be highlighted and showcased to the people out there.
But preserving history in Nigeria is quite challenging. Many historical documents remain locked away in physical archives. Others have deteriorated over time, while more have vanished completely. The consequences sometimes can be irreversible.
We don't have access to proper digital archives as we should be. And a lot of our information, a lot of our maps, a lot of our certain diaries in 1900 and 1800 are in London and in different archives all around the world. Can we have access to those things as we should be as a researcher? No. Yes. No. Because if you go to some certain archives, they will charge you X amount of money for you to photocopy and reproduce some certain materials. And converting those funds to Naira is quite a lot of money, If there are policies that would enable researchers to have access to archival materials outside Nigeria, and there's like a agreement between Nigeria and some of these countries, they can have these materials available for research, for viewing.
Even in the face of the daunting challenge, Adebowale is still forging ahead and gradually changing the narrative.
So when you attain some certain level of work or recommendation or achievement, you find out that there's another level to climb. You find out there's another step. So I don't think there's a proper, if I may use the word, ultimate goal. It's just one step for me. It's one step after the other.
However, funding remains another big challenge holding back the task of digitizing historical records and documents. Adebowale says without targeted investment, more of Nigeria's history could disappear.
On the government side, we need policies to be in place, information to be preserved, information to be digitized. We should have a theme, we should have a policy even to preserve us right now in 2026.
Adebowale remains undeterred. The work continues. One archive, one painting, one oral history, one digital record at a time. Because preserving history, he says, isn't simply about remembering the past. It's about ensuring future generations know who they are and where they come from. Deji Bademosi, CGTN, Lagos, Nigeria.
You're watching Africa Live. Still ahead on the program. Several cheetahs are translocated from South Africa to Zambia, where the species has been absent for nearly 30 years. After nearly 3 decades of absence, 6 cheetahs have successfully been translocated from South Africa to Zambia. Wildlife activists say it is a major step in restoring the threatened species to the greater Luangwa ecosystem. Zambian authorities say they are carrying out multiple such movements to restore predator populations and boost biodiversity. CGTN's Yolisa Njamela has more.
Once widespread across much of Africa and southwestern Asia, the cheetah has experienced a dramatic range contraction over the past century. And this is according to the Endangered Wildlife Trust, a South African conservation organization. The trust asserts that today the species occupies only a fraction of its historical distribution, with most remaining populations found in eastern and southern Africa.
The cheetah at the moment are listed as vulnerable, both globally and within South Africa. In South Africa itself, we have a few different populations of cheetah. We have our captive population, we have our kind of free-ranging populations in the Kruger, for example, and then we have our truly free-roaming populations, which we find in the farmland in the northern parts of South Africa. And then we also have what's like our fenced, our managed population.
Southern Africa remains one of the cheetah's most important strongholds, with the species ranging from Angola and Mozambique to South Africa and Malawi. The 6 cheetahs were carefully selected from South Africa's managed cheetah metapopulation, with consideration given to their genetic diversity and demographics.
This relocation represents essentially the next step in what's been a massive undertaking by a lot of partners, including the Ministry of Tourism and the Department of National Parks and Wildlife in Zambia.
The cheetahs will be closely monitored to ensure their long-term survival.
So every single cheetah has been fitted with a satellite tracking collar, so we're able to watch them remotely. But really importantly, we also have teams on the ground. So Zambian Carnivore Program is intensely monitoring these cheetahs. They have trained up pilots, so we will be able to do aerial tracking as well if they go out of the reach of our monitoring teams.
According to the International Union for Conservation of Nature, the species has declined by about 37% over the past 15 years due to habitat loss, human-wildlife conflict, illegal wildlife trade, and declining prey populations. Yolisa Njamela for CGTN in Johannesburg, South Africa.
Now, many coastal communities in Nigeria are facing the existential threat from ocean surge. It comes as sea levels continue to rise due to climate change and other factors, leading to serious land erosion. However, some coastal communities are fighting back. Here is Deji Bademosi with that story.
For over a decade, Asisat Muibi has lived in this small seaside home at Orimedu community in Lagos. But every year for the past 5 years, she says the sea has been coming closer. It's now just a few meters away from her home. Yet, she doesn't really understand what's going on.
When people throw dirt into the sea, it gets angry and the water level here rises and floods our community. Yesterday, this whole place was flooded with water.
And it's not just a home that is now under threat of the encroaching sea. At the current rate of the ocean surge, the entire community could disappear in the near future. The situation has given fisherman and small business owner Rashidu Wolabi a serious cause for concern.
Usually at this time we should be catching plenty of crayfish. You will see fishermen line the entire stretch of the sea here. But that is not happening now. The water has disrupted everything, and the dredging happening in the sea around here has also not helped matters at all.
It's not just the sea erosion that the residents of Orimedu are worried about. For the past few weeks, the community has been inundated by flooding, resulting from unusually heavy rainfall.
My home was flooded. The water level got to my waist. We had to move our children and aged parents to another location outside the community. It's a terrible situation.
Residents now blame the situation on an ongoing construction of a federal highway in the area. The community is stuck between the sea and this federal highway. Now, here is where the problem is. The sea is encroaching from the right, affecting the community, and then you have this federal highway. So anytime it rains around this area, the whole place gets flooded. The water flows to nowhere at all. Now, according to the residents, before this road was constructed, the water used to flow this way, to the other side where you have like a canal over there. But now, there's nowhere for the water to flow to. So the water remains in the community gets flooded, and it's been flooded now for quite a while. It's caused a lot of damage. So while the residents here worry about the sea, they also worry about the flood. In an attempt to redirect the flood water to the sea, the residents have been digging up small channels through the soil. But the channels are fast turning into massive gullies, washing away the land and leaving the community scarred. Environmentalists say this is dangerous.
When the surges come, that place becomes the weak link in the chain. It becomes an entry point, and that's the impact of what they have seen. So the people are being inundated both from the Atlantic Ocean and also as a result of flooding coming from the inland. So they are doubly exposed. So solutions to such would have to be a mixed solution in terms of geoengineering solutions.
Residents are now resorting to planting coconut trees on the shoreline. But environmentalists say their situation needs more than that.
One of the things they need to do is to have it's called barriers, which they will use builder stones and certain kind of technologies to make sure that it stops the surge. That's one. Then beyond that, on the inner part, drainage, and not just any kind of drainage, as in high technology intense drainage system all around. And then another thing that needs to stop is the ocean dredging, or the dredging in any way around that area.
It's far beyond the community to execute these measures. They have no means of doing it. So it's a tough one for Muibi and other residents of Orimedu. They're watching their community gradually being washed away by the sea. And sadly, there's just nothing they can do about it. Unless there's some sort of intervention by the government, Orimedu will someday join the long casualty list of climate change. Deji Badimosi, CGTN, Orimedu, Lagos, Nigeria.
Well, let's now take a look at your sports news. Here's what's ahead. It's all systems go as the 2026 Women's Africa Cup of Nations kicks off in Morocco today.
How would you create your legend? On the fields, on the tracks, in the arenas of Africa. Were you born to be a player? Could this moment be yours? Sports Scene. Find